12. True Creepy Grocery Store. Stories from Reddit Story. 1. The Aisle Part 1. My name is Tyler, and I was 24 years old when this happened. I was shopping alone at a grocery store in suburban Denver, Colorado around 9:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. The store was nearly empty, just a few late-night shoppers and some employees restocking shelves. I was in the cereal aisle when I noticed a man at the far end. He was standing perfectly still, staring at me. I moved to another aisle. He appeared there too. I went to produce. He followed. Every aisle I turned down, he was there within seconds, watching me with eyes that never blinked. Subscribe now and leave a comment below, because what that man wanted still terrifies me. Part 2. I tried to convince myself it was coincidence. The store was not that big. Maybe we just happened to need the same items. But he was not shopping. His cart was empty. His hands never reached for products. He just stood at the end of whatever aisle I entered, watching me. I walked to the front of the store near the registers where employees were working. The man followed at a distance, stopping near the pharmacy section, never taking his eyes off me. I found a store employee and told her what was happening. She looked toward the pharmacy area. I do not see anyone. I turned. The spot where he'd been standing was empty. I finished my shopping quickly and walked to my car. As I loaded my groceries, I noticed a dark sedan parked 3 spaces away. The engine was running, and through the windshield, I could see him watching me. I got in my car and drove straight to the police station. When I looked in my rearview mirror, the sedan was following. Part 3. The police took my statement and had an officer follow me home. The sedan had disappeared by then. 3 days later, I received a letter in my mail. No return address. Inside was a photograph of me loading groceries into my car, taken from inside the dark sedan. On the back were the words, "I know where you live now." The police increased patrols in my area, but never identified the man. I moved to a different apartment 2 weeks later. I never found out who he was or what he wanted, but sometimes late at night I still check to make sure no one is watching from a parked car outside. Story 2. The Employee Part 1. My name is Jasmine, and I was 19 years old when this happened. I worked the closing shift at a grocery store in Jacksonville, Florida. It was a Friday night, 10:45 p.m., and I was straightening shelves before we locked up. The store had been empty for almost an hour. That is when I heard footsteps in the aisle behind me. I turned around, expecting to see a co-worker. The aisle was empty. But through a gap in the shelving, I could see someone standing on the other side, just standing there watching me through the products. Before I continue, hit subscribe, because what was hunting me through that store still haunts my dreams. Part 2. I walked quickly toward the front of the store, where my manager was counting registers. There is someone still in the store, in aisle 7. My manager frowned. We did the final sweep 20 minutes ago. The store is empty. I saw someone through the shelves. He sighed and grabbed his keys. I will check it out. I followed him back to aisle 7. He walked the length of the aisle, checking behind displays and end caps. There is no one here. I was about to argue when I heard a sound. A soft laugh coming from somewhere above us. We both looked up. The ceiling tiles were the drop type, the kind that sit in a metal grid, and one of them was slightly askew, pushed up at one corner. Someone was in the ceiling. Part 3. My manager called the police. They arrived within 10 minutes and searched the ceiling space. They found a nest. Blankets, food containers, empty water bottles. Someone had been living above our store for at least a week. They also found a notebook with observations about employees. Our names, our schedules, physical descriptions. There were notes about which of us worked alone, which of us left through the back door. My name appeared multiple times. They never found the person who'd been hiding up there. But after what they found in that notebook, I never closed the store alone again. Story 3. The Parking Lot. Part 1. My name is Marcus, and I was 31 years old when this happened. I was loading groceries into my car at a supermarket in Phoenix, Arizona, around 8:15 p.m. on a Saturday. The parking lot was crowded with weekend shoppers. That is when I noticed the woman. She was standing between two cars, about 20 feet away, watching me. She was crying mascara, running down her face. "Please help me," she said. "There is a man following me." I looked around, but did not see anyone suspicious. When I turned back to ask her more questions, I saw the van, a white cargo van pulling slowly into the lane behind me. Subscribe now. Because what those people were planning still makes me check my mirrors. Part 2. The woman took a step toward me, reaching out her hand. "Please, I am so scared. Can you walk me to my car?" Something felt wrong. The van had stopped about 30 feet away, engine running. "Which car is yours?" I asked. She pointed toward the back of the lot, away from the store entrance, away from witnesses. I looked at the van again. The driver was watching us. "Let me call security," I said, pulling out my phone. The woman's expression changed. The tears stopped. Something harder crossed her face. "Never mind," she said. "I will be fine." She turned and walked toward the van. The side door opened and she climbed in. The van pulled away slowly. Part 3. I reported the incident to store security and the police. They reviewed the parking lot cameras. The footage showed the van circling the lot for over an hour, the woman approaching 3 different people before me. The others had walked with her toward the back of the lot before turning around. I was the only one who refused. The police never identified the people in the van, but they told me about similar reports from other parking lots in the area. A distressed woman awaiting van targets who were never seen again. I do not help strangers in parking lots anymore. I call security and let them handle it, because sometimes the person asking for help is the trap. Story 4. The Night Shift. Part 1. My name is Derek, and I was 22 years old when this happened. I worked the overnight stocking shift at a grocery store in Cleveland, Ohio. It was a Wednesday night, 3:20 a.m., and I was alone in the back warehouse organizing pallets. My co-workers were scattered throughout the store, restocking different sections. That is when I heard the footsteps. Heavy footsteps on concrete coming from deeper in the warehouse. I was supposed to be the only one back there. Hit subscribe before I continue, because what I found hiding in that warehouse changed everything. Part 2. I grabbed a box cutter from my pocket and walked slowly toward the sound. The warehouse was a maze of pallets and shelving stretching back toward the loading dock. The lights were dim, casting long shadows between the stacks. "Hello, someone back here?" Silence. Then more footsteps moving away from me. I followed the sound toward the loading dock. The area was dark, the overhead lights turned off to save energy. I found the light switch and flipped it on. A man was crouched behind a pallet of water bottles, blinking in the sudden brightness. He was dirty, disheveled, holding a half-eaten package of lunch meat. "Please," he said. "I was just hungry. I will leave." I called my manager. We were supposed to report anyone we found in the warehouse. But when my manager arrived with security, the man was gone. He had slipped out the loading dock door while I was waiting. Part 3. We reported the incident to the police. They searched the area around the store but did not find him. A week later, another store employee found something disturbing in a storage closet near the warehouse. A sleeping bag, empty food packages, and a collection of photographs. Pictures of employees taken from hiding spots throughout the store. The police identified the man through fingerprints. He had a history of stalking and assault charges in 3 states. They caught him 2 weeks later trying to break into a different grocery store. I never worked the night shift alone after that, and I always checked the warehouse thoroughly before starting my work. Story 5. The Customer Part 1. My name is Keisha, and I was 26 years old when this happened. I worked as a cashier at a grocery store in Atlanta, Georgia. It was a Saturday afternoon around 3:15 p.m., and the store was busy with weekend shoppers. That is when he came through my line, a man, maybe 50, with grey in hair and eyes that seemed to look right through me. He ordered nothing unusual, but when I handed him his receipt, he grabbed my wrist and leaned close. "I have been watching you for 3 months, he whispered. "I know where you live. Subscribe now." Because what he left in my mailbox that night still haunts me. Part 2. I yanked my arm back and called for my manager, but by the time she arrived, the man was gone. Disappeared into the crowd of shoppers. I told her what happened. She reviewed the security footage, but couldn't get a clear image of his face. "Maybe he was just trying to scare you," she said. Some people have strange ideas of humor. I did not think it was a joke. The way he said it, calm and matter-of-fact, made me believe every word. That night when I got home, I found an envelope in my mailbox. Inside was a photograph of me walking to my car after a shift 2 weeks earlier. On the back were the words, "You looked beautiful that night." Part 3. I called the police. They took the photograph and my statement, but without more evidence, there was nothing they could do. I started varying my schedule, parking in different spots, always leaving with a co-worker. A week later, they caught him. He was arrested at a different grocery store, following another female employee to her car. The police found photographs of multiple women in his vehicle, along with notebooks detailing their schedules and routines. His name was Harold Whitmore. He had been stalking women at grocery stores across the state for over 2 years. He's serving 10 years in prison now, but I still check my mailbox carefully every night. Story 6. The Bathroom Part 1. My name is Victor, and I was 28 years old when this happened. I stopped at a grocery store in rural Texas, about an hour outside of Austin, to use the bathroom during a long drive. It was a Tuesday evening around 7:45 p.m. The store was quiet, just a few customers browsing the aisles. The men's room had 2 stalls, and when I walked in, one was occupied. I took the empty stall and did my business. But when I came out to wash my hands, I noticed the feet under the other stall door. They were facing the wrong direction, facing the wall, facing me. Subscribe now, because what I discovered made me run. Part 2. I stood at the sink, watching those feet in the mirror. They were perfectly still. Not moving, not shifting, just pointing at the wall between the stalls, where I had just been. I dried my hands quickly and walked toward the door. As my hand touched the handle, I heard a soft laugh from inside the stall. I did not wait. I pushed through the door and walked quickly to the front of the store. I found an employee and told her what I had seen. She called the manager and they went back to check. Both stalls were empty. No one was there. But on the floor of the stall, where I had seen the feet, they found a small camera positioned to capture anyone using the other stall. Part 3. The police came and collected the camera as evidence. The footage showed at least a dozen victims, all recorded without their knowledge. They never identified who planted the camera or who was laughing in that stall. The person had somehow escaped without being seen. The store added security cameras on the hallway leading to the bathrooms, but the damage was done. I do not use public restrooms in unfamiliar places anymore, and I always check for anything that does not belong before I use a stall. Story 7, The Child Part 1. My name is Amanda, and I was 33 years old when this happened. I was shopping with my 6-year-old daughter Emma at a grocery store in suburban Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It was a Sunday afternoon around 2:30 p.m., and the store was crowded with families. I had turned away for just a moment to compare prices on pasta sauce. When I looked back, Emma was talking to a man I had never seen before. He was kneeling down to her level, showing her something on his phone. "Mommy, look," Emma said. "He says he has puppies in his car." Subscribe now, because what that man was planning still makes me hold my daughter closer. Part 2. I grabbed Emma's hand and pulled her toward me. "Who are you? What are you doing with my daughter?" The man stood up slowly. He was maybe 45, with a friendly smile that did not reach his eyes. "I was just showing her pictures of my dogs. She said she liked puppies." "Emma, did he ask you to go anywhere with him?" Emma nodded. "He said if I came to his car, I could pet them." My blood ran cold. "Get away from us, right now." The man held up his hands. "Hey, no need to get upset. I was just being friendly." He turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd before I could call for help. Part 3. I reported the incident to store security. They reviewed the cameras and found footage of the man approaching multiple children throughout the store. The police were called. They identified him from the footage as a registered sex offender who was supposed to stay away from places where children gathered. He was arrested 2 days later at another grocery store, attempting the same approach with a different child. His car did not have any puppies, but it did have rope duct tape and a blanket in the trunk. I never let Emma out of my sight in public anymore, and I have taught her that no stranger, no matter how friendly, should ever ask her to go anywhere. Story 8, The Follower Part 1. My name is Brian, and I was 35 years old when this happened. I noticed him in the produce section of a grocery store in Seattle, Washington, around 6 p.m. on a Wednesday. He was maybe 50, browsing the apples, glancing at me occasionally. I thought nothing of it. But when I moved to the dairy section, he was there. When I went to the bakery, he appeared. When I checked out, he got in line behind me. And when I walked to my car, I saw him in my rearview mirror writing something down. my license plate number. Subscribe now. Because what he did with that information changed my life. Part 2. I drove home checking my mirrors constantly. I did not see him following. But 3 days later, I came home to find my apartment had been broken into. Nothing valuable was taken, but things had been moved. Someone had gone through my belongings, looked at my photographs, touched my personal items. The police found no fingerprints, no evidence of who had broken in. A week later, it happened again. Another break-in, nothing stolen, but clear signs someone had been inside. I installed security cameras. The third time it happened, I caught him on video. The man from the grocery store, using a copy of my key, walking calmly through my apartment. Part 3. The police arrested him. His name was Dennis Hobbs. He had been using license plates to track down addresses, making copies of keys, and breaking into homes for years. He never stole anything. He just wanted to be in people's spaces, to touch their things, to know their secrets. The police found evidence of over 20 victims, all people he had followed from grocery stores and other public places. He's serving 8 years in prison now. But I changed my locks, moved to a new apartment, and never park in the same spot twice. Story 9, The Note Part 1. My name is Destiny, and I was 21 years old when this happened. I worked as a bagger at a grocery store in Memphis, Tennessee. It was a Thursday evening around 8 p.m., and I was helping a customer load groceries into her car. When I returned inside, I found a note tucked into my apron pocket. I had not noticed anyone put it there. The note said, "I have been watching you all night. Meet me in the parking lot after your shift. If you tell anyone about this note, I will know. Subscribe now." Because whoever wrote that note was closer than I realized. Part 2. I showed the note to my manager immediately. She called security and had them review the footage. The cameras showed a man slipping the note into my pocket while I was bent over loading bags into a cart. He had been standing right behind me, and I had not felt a thing. They identified him as a regular customer who came in several times a week, always at the same time, always watching the baggers. The police were called. They found him in the parking lot, sitting in his car waiting. Part 3. His name was Gregory Simmons. He had a history of stalking charges in 2 states. When they searched his car, they found notebooks with detailed observations about grocery store employees, schedules, physical descriptions, notes about who seemed weak or lonely. He had been doing this for years, targeting workers at different stores, building files on potential victims. I do not know what he would have done if I had met him in the parking lot that night. The police said I did the right thing by telling someone immediately. I quit my job a week later. I could not stop thinking about how close he'd been, how easily he had slipped that note into my pocket without me noticing. Story 10, The Van Part 1. My name is Anthony, and I was 29 years old when this happened. I was leaving a grocery store in suburban Chicago, Illinois, around 9:15 p.m. on a Saturday. The parking lot was well lit, but mostly empty. My car was parked near the back, in a spot I had taken when the lot was full. As I approached, I noticed a van parked directly next to my driver's side door. A white cargo van with no windows. The engine was running, and through the windshield I could see 2 figures in the front seats watching me. Subscribe now, because what was inside that van still haunts me. Part 2. I stopped walking and pulled out my phone. I pretended to make a call while I assessed the situation. The van was positioned perfectly. If I walked to my door, I would be blocked from view by both vehicles. I changed direction, walking toward the store entrance instead. Behind me, I heard a door slide open, the side door of the van. I started running. I made it to the store entrance and told a security guard what was happening. He called the police. By the time officers arrived, the van was gone. Part 3. The police reviewed the parking lot cameras. The van had been circling the lot for over an hour before parking next to my car. They could not read the license plate clearly, but they recognized the pattern. A white van, 2 occupants targeting lone shoppers in isolated areas. 3 weeks later, they caught them. A father and son team using the van to rob people at gunpoint in parking lots across the city. One of their victims had fought back and been killed. I was lucky. I noticed the van trusted my instincts and ran. Story 11, The Deli Counter, Part 1. My name is Rachel, and I was 27 years old when this happened. I was waiting at the deli counter of a grocery store in Baltimore, Maryland, around 5 p.m. on a weekday. The store was busy with after-work shoppers. A man was standing next to me, also waiting. He seemed normal at first. Then he leaned close and whispered, "I know you do not see me, but I see you every day. I watch you from across the street. I know what time you wake up. I know when you shower. I know when you leave for work." Before he walked away, he said one more thing. "Nice pajamas last night? Subscribe now, because that man lived closer than I ever imagined." Part 2. I froze, unable to process what he'd said. By the time I turned to look for him, he was gone, disappeared into the crowd of shoppers. I went home and looked out my window at the apartment building across the street. One of the windows had a direct view into my bedroom. I called the police. They checked the building, but could not identify which unit might have been watching me. I bought blackout curtains that night and kept them closed constantly. A week later, I saw him again, walking into the building across the street. I called the police immediately. Part 3. His name was Carl Pittman. He'd been living in a unit directly across from my apartment for 6 months. The police found binoculars, a camera with a telephoto lens, and hundreds of photographs of me through my window. He had been watching me for the entire time he lived there, documenting my routine, my habits, my life. He was charged with stalking and voyeurism and is serving 5 years in prison. I moved to a different apartment the week after his arrest. Ground floor, no windows facing other buildings. I never felt safe in that old apartment again. Story 12, The Closing Part 1. My name is Jerome, and I was 23 years old when this happened. I worked the closing shift at a grocery store in New Orleans, Louisiana. It was a Sunday night, 10:30 p.m., and I was one of 3 employees left in the building. We had locked the doors 30 minutes earlier and were doing final cleaning. That is when the lights went out. All of them at once. The emergency lights came on, casting the store in a dim red glow. And in that glow, I saw a figure standing at the end of aisle 5. A figure that had not been there when the lights went out. Subscribe now. Because what happened in those next 10 minutes almost cost me my life. Part 2. I called out to my co-workers. Marcus, Lisa. You guys okay? Silence. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. The figure at the end of aisle 5 was gone. I walked toward the front of the store where the manager's office was located. The emergency lights cast strange shadows everywhere, making the store feel unfamiliar. I found Marcus near the registers, looking shaken. "Did you see that?" he asked. "Someone is in here with us." "Where is Lisa?" "I do not know. She was in the back. We heard a scream from the stockroom." Part 3. We ran to the back and found Lisa pressed against the loading dock door. A man was standing between her and us holding a knife. "I have been waiting for closing time," he said. "Less witnesses." Marcus grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall and threw it at the man. It caught him in the shoulder and he dropped the knife. I tackled him while Marcus grabbed the knife. Lisa called 911. The police arrived 10 minutes later. The aftermath. His name was Eugene Whitfield. He had hidden in the store before closing, waiting for the lights to go out. He had done this at 3 other stores, robbing employees after hours. In one case, he had attacked a night manager who tried to resist. He is serving 15 years in prison now. Our store changed its closing procedures after that. Full building sweeps 2-person buddy system panic buttons in every section. But I still think about those emergency lights. The figure at the end of the aisle. The 10 minutes when we did not know if we would make it out alive.